Jazzcast Pros.
So we're seeing all this research now that people who volunteer actually have a longer lifespan. People who volunteer have reduced risk of heart disease. People who volunteer have improvements in their own mental health because they're giving back, and that feels good.
Welcome to the Healthy Illness Podcast, the podcast helping you build healthier relationships while living with mental health conditions. I am your host, Kelly Marie, and in this episode, and next episode, by the way, we will be talking with Sara Passamonte. She is the CEO of Compeer in Rochester. You will be able to walk away after these two episodes with an understanding of what peer support is, how to get involved, why it's necessary for all of us to be a part of the, I would say, continuum of care. And we're going to dive into Sara's story, like how did she get here and why is Compeer so important to her? So with that, thank you for listening. And Sara, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I am so excited to be here. It was such a nice stroke of luck to meet you and get a spot on this podcast. So Compeer is a real word, and it means companion and peer. And that's exactly what we do. We pair people in friendships and peer support relationships on an informal and formal basis. We tackle the non-clinical side of mental health treatment. We work really great as an adjunct to traditional therapy, whatever people call that these days. But our origin story begins back in the 70s where many, many people were still institutionalized. And our founder became familiar with this program called Adopt a Patient that was taking place at the psychiatric hospital in Rochester. And just the timing of it happened sort of as deinstitutionalization was happening as well. So what started out as a small group of volunteers visiting patients that lived in the institution, it just as quickly became a community-based organization and followed some people quite literally into the community as they were seeking social support. So many people were in the hospital that didn't need to be, but they also weren't ready to go home. And so many of them didn't even have a home. So the program changed the name from Adopt a Patient to Compeer to better reflect the mission. Started serving children as well. And the really cool thing that happened is our founder, her name is Bunny. She was able to get some funding from New York State Office of Mental Health to take the model and replicate it throughout New York State. And then it took off from there. So you had these programs popping up throughout New York and Pennsylvania. And then pretty soon it was, when I started back in 2005, there were 100 affiliates, 13 of them in Australia. So people just took this model across the globe and said, there's got to be more to treatment than just going and sitting and talking to a therapist or just getting on medication. And lo and behold, 50 years later, we have this pandemic that just goes ahead and, justifies everything that we've been doing for the last 50 years. So while many people are not familiar with the term Compeer, like I said, even though it's in the dictionary, it's not always apparent exactly what we do. But in the last, I would say 15 years, where peer support has become a more well-known term and people are actually finding viable careers in peer support in both mental health and substance use recovery, we have just kept a really good name for ourselves. And we still have a fully replicable model that people can take anywhere they go.
That's incredible. I learned something new. I didn't know Compeer was a word. It made sense as a brand word, but to know that it's an actual word in the dictionary is pretty cool.
The story is our founder had to fight for that word because there were a lot of people that said, no one knows what this word means. And they're right. Still true. It's still true. But I think that peer language has really served us better, again, in the last 15, 20 years, as opposed to back in 1973 when this woman is trying to get things off the ground and explain to people just about companionship for people with mental illness to begin with. This was just unheard of. And now it's so common, but we were ahead of the time.
And I get it. Like the adopt a patient, the wording makes more sense. But when you think about the movement of institutionalization to outpatient care and communities being more open and compassionate when it comes to mental health, what types of work does Compeer do? Like, what does a peer do? And is that different from having a therapist?
Yes. And since the beginning, when, again, we really just had adult to adult programming, it was an identified volunteer, an identified client. The client was referred by a mental health professional. The volunteer came from the community just out of the goodness of their hearts to, give back. They were spending time in the community doing anything from grabbing a cup of coffee to going to the gym to, once we started serving kids, throwing a ball around in the park. It was always meant to be very natural, very organic, just something that people might just go ahead and do on their own, that it wouldn't take this special superhero type of person to come along and completely change their lives overnight. It was just this steady presence. And we ask for an hour a week. To this day, we still, from our volunteers, ask for 1 hour a week. So what do you do with an hour a week? I know I could tell you how I waste so many hours of my week doing something that doesn't matter. But in the beginning, we had a lot of the generation before the boomers, the greatest generation, they were just volunteering their time in droves. They had the time, they had the resources. But again, it was there was an identified client, identified volunteer, the helper, the helpee. There's this line, As time went on, and especially now, that line has sort of disappeared and grayed very much to where a volunteer may have gone through, as much of a mental health challenge as the person that they're helping. So we do like what we're seeing as far as this relatability, but where it started was almost, I don't want to say authoritative, but there was just clear, this is the person who's helping and this is the person who's getting the help. With the youth program, it's a little bit more cut and dry. You have the adult mentor, you have the child mentee who's learning from them. But again, all the activities are meant to be a low lift, both financially, time-wise. We want people to be able to be consistent. So we don't want people to sign up and say, hey, I'm going to give you 100 hours a month because I'm, off of my job right now or I'm retired. We just want people to do these small doses of socialization to help that person not only find a friend in that person, but the hope is that they take these social skills they're learning and apply them to the rest of the world. Maybe the coffee shop they went to with their compeer 7 times, they can go the 8th time on their own and meet some new friends. So the volunteer program is very much that. It's friendship, it's mentorship, it's going out for a cup of coffee, it's playing a board game, it's just whatever you do in your normal life. We would tell people, I used to train volunteers for many years. I would tell people, you go to the grocery store on a Saturday morning, bring your compeer with you. That could be, for me to this day, you won't find me at Wegmans on a Saturday morning because it gives me anxiety. I don't even have a diagnosis of anxiety, but it gives me that anxiety. So I can only imagine what that's like for anybody else. So we ask people to kind of carry on with their daily lives and include another person. When peer support became more formalized and we were able to hire staff to do some of this work, on that side of things, it could be a little bit more formal because they're working towards goals. So we might ask for our staff to do a few more hours a week than, 4 hours a month. But it really largely amounts to kind of the same thing, that they're picking up on social skills. They're picking up on daily living skills. They have a new connection. And that can make all the difference as a supplement and adjunct to other types of treatment.
And how does someone find Compeer? How does someone, if they say, listen, I think this would be good for me, right? Like I could use somebody just around for support. How do they get to Compeer?
Yeah, so our referrals do still come from mental health professionals in most cases. So if somebody is working with a therapist, a clinician, somebody's working with in the case of a child, a school social worker, even a primary care physician can make these referrals to Compeer. It helps us so that we know that there's somebody involved on the clinical side, because we're not clinicians and we don't employ them, and we don't want our volunteers to ever have to feel like they're playing that role. We ensure that the person has that person. They do what they can on that side, and then they make the referral to Compeer. A lot of the referral packet is going to be client-driven, participant-driven anyways. We want to know what your hobbies and interests are. We want to know what you're looking for in a match. And then on the volunteer side, you go on our website and you just literally, it's like the first button there, because we have a lot of people that are in demand for these services. We maintain waiting lists upwards of 100, 150 people at any given time, because the service is actually pretty popular. And as much as we love that, we love that we're wanted, we love that we're needed, we still have our work cut out for us in getting enough volunteers to meet that demand.
And so how does a person become a volunteer? Is there training?
Yeah, absolutely. We provide some training. So we do a lot of screening. This is an old joke I had with the former director of Big Brothers Big Sisters in Rochester. We're putting kids in cars with strangers, right? So we put these volunteers through a pretty hefty process. We do a couple different levels of background checks. That being said, we're not always looking for people with a squeaky clean history. So people that have had a past, we'll take your past. There are some things that we can't get around. Certainly if people have had criminal charges with, aggressive behavior, things like that, there's certain things we can't get around. But in most cases, we are able to accept volunteers of all kinds of backgrounds. And I always find that people who have gone through it, whether that's on a mental health side of things, substance use, overcome whatever challenges they have had in their past, they make really great mentors. They make really great friends. And it helps the other person see, like, no one's perfect. And, if they can do it, I can do it. So I do really like that we get this variety of people who come to apply. And when you do apply, you get paired with a staff member who takes you through the whole process. So they're going to hold your hand while you go through, these background checks, and we do an interview really for the purposes of getting to know you and who you might want to match with. Because at the end of the day, we have 100 people that we need to narrow down to make sure that we have a good match. We put a lot of effort into that process instead of just saying, all right, this person's been waiting the longest, so we're going to give that person to you. We look at interests and hobbies. We look at geographic location. Compeer Rochester covers Monroe County in New York. If you're listening from afar, go to compeer.org and you will see if there's a Compeer in your in your region. We also have Compeer Calling, where you could do some phone call support to clients who are in need of that. Sometimes we just use that as an interim service while people are getting their one-on-one match, because the waiting times can be long. And I've looked forward to a day where I get volunteers on a waiting list. That's my dream, is that I have a waiting list of volunteers, and then the person referred gets to pick who they want to match with.
I would like for that to happen as well.
Right.
I like that. I like that a lot. So I heard you talk about the type of peers that have been volunteering with Compeer over the years. And as you move and started to connect with more folks with lived experience, how has that changed the lives of the volunteers and the folks that are coming into the Compeer program looking for a peer?
After several years of doing this, when we became a little bit more established, we started getting anecdotes from therapists saying that through this program, their patient or their client started talking a little bit less in sessions about what was wrong and more about what they did with their Compeer match the week before. So sometimes it's just having something to fill the time. I mean, I take for granted I have a busy social life. I have a child. I have friends. I have my parents are still very healthy. I think a lot of us, depending on how big your social network is, we take it for granted that we have like a million people we can call if something good happens, or somebody really close to us we can call when something bad happens. And for a lot of people who were referred to Compeer over the years, they didn't have that one person. So there's certainly the side of the quote unquote client, right, that gets this benefit and gets to meet somebody and gets to go out and experience different things. But for a volunteer, there's research and anecdotes, of course, that the benefits really get to the volunteer, sometimes even more so than the participant. So we're seeing all this research now that people who volunteer actually have a longer lifespan. People who volunteer have reduced risk of heart disease. People who volunteer have improvements in their own mental health because they're giving back, and that feels good. And sometimes it's just what have I been sad about lately, and how does that compare to what my match is going through? And both of our experiences are valid, and both of us may have a reason to be sad one day and happy the next. But I think for me, it always just put things into perspective.
Thinking about my own, experience, I talk a lot about gratitude and changing of perspective and mental health, and, making the illnesses, a part of who I am, not who I am. It's just another layer to the calligraphy that is, the drawing of my life. And so I am encouraged by just the natural progression of life that Compeer has seemed to take in. And for me, I know that I missed that in my initial recovery. and couldn't quite find that connection. And that's where all this stuff came from, the podcast and the front seat life and all those things, trying to be able to create the thing that I needed and didn't know was actually there, because Compeer was actually there and available. I just didn't know that that was a resource. And so how can we help get the word out about Compeer so that more people know to ask their therapist or ask their doctor or whoever their clinical provider is to be able to refer them into a program like Compeer?
There's certainly something to be said for word of mouth. So sometimes half the battle is just like you said, it's just speaking about it, asking, inquiring, like asking your therapist, is this available in my area? Even if you don't have the wherewithal that day to do the Google search and find out from the therapist what social supports might be available in a community, even if it's not a Compeer program. But this is also why we take our show on the road. This is why I'm sitting here with you today. I mean, for the last 20 years, this is all I've done is kind of eat, breathe, Compeer, and the power of volunteering at Compeer. And people can also be that word of mouth. There's only one of me, but hopefully there's a bunch of people listening who can advocate for a Compeer program. If there's not a Compeer in your area, there's a way to advocate. There's also similar types of programs and just ideas that, again, your neighbor might be your mentor some days, and your doctor might be providing some support that is really important in the moment, and maybe is, making sure that your medications are just right and things like that. At the end of the day, you want somebody to be able to call or something to look forward to at the end of the week. And so we just would ask that anybody listening, come check out the website. CompeerRochester.org is going to tell you all about this program. Compeer.org will tell you about International Compeer and what's going on in those efforts. And we can work together. I mean, I'm happy to take anybody along this journey and find a Compeer for you.
And so what age group, how young can someone be? How old can someone be to be able to volunteer and also to receive services?
Yeah, so volunteers need to be 18 and up, although we will take high school students in for internships sometimes, or come help out an event so you can just kind of dip your toe and see what's going on with Compeer. We love that. But 18 to volunteer in the one-to-one program. And then we serve people 5 and up. So the only thing we don't do is early childhood. That's a specialty that we just have not touched on. 3-year-olds need different kinds of interventions, but 5 and up. So our youth program goes about 5 to 21. We have sort of this transition age, 18 to 21, where you might go in the youth program, you might go in the adult program, and then adults definitely 18 or 21 and up, depending on what the person's interests are. If you like to play bingo, you can come into our adult program. If you want to sit on Santa's lap at Christmas time, come to our youth program. Everything is very inclusive, very open. We serve entire families. We can serve a parent, a child, a grandparent. We have a great family support program. We haven't even gotten into that. We have a wonderful veterans program. We haven't even gotten that. We might need 4 parts of this, Kelly. I don't know, but just the whole point of this social support that tackles all these ages, minus the 2 and 3-year-olds and the newborns. We have a lot to offer, across the spectrum there.
So you talked a little bit about the youth program and the transition program piece of it. What about, you said families and veterans. What about those programs? Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so our family support program is staffed by parents of children with mental health diagnoses. So these are literally parents who have gone through the systems with their children. They have all this lived experience, and some of it is ugly. It's like literally blood, sweat, and tears they have put into their children, and in navigating these systems that can seem impossible and sometimes are impossible. And they take all of that pain and all of the successes, and then they can kind of have this teach to fish model with other parents where they're supporting them from a friendship and emotional standpoint, sometimes going to appointments with them to help them out, schools, committee for special education type meetings, legal, but a lot of it is just sometimes being that voice on the other end of the phone when a parent is stressed out. So that program used to be reserved just for parents of kids who were referred to our youth program. We've actually been able to serve parents as a standalone service, even if their kids don't want or are qualifying for the mentoring program. So family peer support is huge. And they have made leaps and bounds also, again, in the last 15 years with the formalization of peer services, because you can get this credential, you can get this free certification and just slap that, that peer support certificate on. And it's just a piece of paper, but it really does legitimize everything that somebody's been through. And they give you some training. It's done through through New York State, Families Together in New York State. They give parents training too, so that it's one thing to say, I've been through this and here's what I went through, but they teach them a lot about how to strategically share these experiences and make sure that they're taking care of themselves too. Because at the end of the day, all peers, everybody with lived experience, your past lived experience can easily become your present experience. And we're very accommodating and try to be a good place to work for people who might still have some residual lived experience.
Yeah.
You know what recovery looks like.
Yeah. It's a journey.
It is. We're here for it.
Yes. And then you mentioned vets. You have a special program for our veterans?
Yeah. So back in about 2010, we started serving vets. We tried to mimic our one-to-one program. It failed miserably. Not a single veteran wanted to be an identified client. They wanted to be the volunteer. I don't need help, but I can help somebody else. So we were doing a lot of that. And instead of trying to force the square peg into the round hole, we changed and we started making all of our vet programming group based. We hired all vets to staff it. To this day, it's all veterans running that program. So it became more like, come out and play a game of paintball or come and do, golf in the summer. And we're not going to tell you you're a volunteer and you're a client. It just, all that language went away and it worked like magic. People started forming one-to-one relationships within the program without being told to do so. Our funding has increased for that program. It actually is a very successfully well-funded program. We run the private Dwyer programming for Monroe County, and that's all about peer-to-peer support for veterans. So again, we just get these people in groups, and it's all genders. It's for vets and their families. A lot of these activities we make available to spouses and children because a lot of veterans were coming and saying, I'd love to do this, but my family's got, they're counting on me to be here too. I'm like, bring them. So the newest program we have is called Vets Driving Vets, and it's exactly what it sounds like. That one I don't have to sell because it's a veteran driver giving a ride. It's like an Uber, but you know that the Uber driver understands you, and it's really awesome. So we actually purchased our first ever 2 vehicles this year. We have a fleet of 2 vehicles.
That is awesome.
And paying veteran drivers to take veterans to both medical and non-medical appointments. So it can be social, it can be, necessary, it could be whatever. So there's like 2 rules. Can't drive you to a liquor store and we can't drive you to the casino. And other than that,
that's fair.
It's all fair. Yeah. So we're still doing a lot for veterans. We also acquired Oasis Adaptive Sports, which was an organization dedicated to adaptive sports for a lot of it was veterans with service connected injuries, like missing a limb. So you have these adaptive equipment, type things like snow sports, skiing. We'd have a sit ski. So we acquired that program back in 2021 and we continue to do adaptive sports. And it's expanded really beyond just people with physical injuries to people who have PTSD, military sexual trauma, things like that may be coming along for their ride and not just a physical injury.
And someone would find out about that the same way.
Yes. So all the programs are listed on our website. There's not a vet program at every Compeer. I know a lot of Compeers are looking into how they can expand their programs and services, but Compeer Rochester is actually covering the veteran services for Monroe County, Ontario County, and Wayne County.
So that's central New York.
We say we're getting from like Western Finger Lakes. I think Ontario is still considered Finger Lakes, and Wayne is like just getting to that central. But I think they might still be caught in the Finger Lakes. You know how New York likes to call its regions different things every 5 years. I think we're still in the Finger Lake stage.
And to everyone in New York City, we're just upstate. It doesn't matter. You're just not in New York City. You're just that other place.
Yeah.
So if there is one myth or misunderstanding that you think people have about Compeer and volunteers and clients, what would you say that is?
I think people who are familiar with Compeer think that it's maybe inaccessible, even for both. Like, I'm too busy to be volunteer, or I'm not that person. I'm not saving lives over here. I'm not a superhero. That mentality where people feel like it takes a lot more to give than it actually does. So I say 4 hours a month, and it's not a lot, but it is a commitment. So we don't want to try to downplay that. It's a real commitment you're making to a human being. This isn't, saying you're going to do the clean sweep once a year and pick up trash and then you don't show up. It's fine, but we do look for that. So as much as I say everybody can do this, almost everybody can do this, and with support from the organization. And on the participant side, or people who are being referred, and even mental health professionals, we've had a lot over the years say, oh, their waiting list is too long, don't even bother. Well, we don't match an order. Like I was telling you, we don't give the last person or the first person waiting to the first volunteer. We are truly matching based on what we think is going to be successful. So we've had people referred 2 months ago that might actually get matched before somebody that was referred a year ago, if it's going to mean a long-term success. And once you get a match, we have people that have been doing this for 35 years. I mean, I have a match that's been going for 35 years. I have a match that's been going for 40 years. I've been connected with my individuals of this program for 20 years. And that's not uncommon. So even though there can be a wait and it's not for everybody, we have made these very long-term relationships happen. And you just don't see that anywhere else.
That's incredible. So everyone that's interested, I was going to ask you what types of volunteers are you looking for, but anyone and everyone interested in this space, yes. I feel like should just ask the question and get more information.
Absolutely. We just want people. We want people who want to help. We want people to have a little bit of extra time, a little bit of capacity just to be there for somebody. It doesn't take much, but it takes a few things.
And what about cost to the participant?
No cost. So we do have some services that are billable through Medicaid, not the volunteer program, but some of those formal peer support services are billed through Medicaid, or we find funding for other sources for people who don't have Medicaid. But the volunteer program is absolutely no cost, no insurance requirements, nothing. We are lucky to have some pretty good funding from the Office of Mental Health, and we hope that will continue for many decades to come.
This is so good. Okay, I want to take a break right here, Sara, and come back with part 2. So you have just been listening to the Healthy Illness Podcast with myself, Kelly Marie, and Sara Passamonte, the CEO of Compeer Rochester. We're going to come back next week and finish this conversation, learn more about Sara, learn more about the specialty work that is done at Compeer. And maybe you will feel the urge to find out more about the organization and become a volunteer yourself. So until next time, I encourage you to be the light.